Well, I don't. It is, I don't know what I would do.
You'll get
An
no,
email.
you'll get an email.
It'll be in your Zoom, yes, accounts, right?
Yeah.
Can people online, can you just do a thumbs up to show that you can hear us? Can you just do a thumbs up that you can hear? Just,
Yeah.
okay, good.
Marjorie's
We
right.
can
Very good.
We can hear.
All right, good. That's all. Okay. Stay muted.
Totally.
That's good. Um. Fine.
Is that-
Yeah.
I'll get the ice. All right. All right.
Exit magic.
Hey, well, welcome in.
I'll just see the moment. Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. Very brief introduction because I want to give out as much time as possible. But I think I said in my listserv posting, I don't know if it was on the synagogue one, is that in the last however long this administration has been here, 15 months, and since October 7th, I have felt like politically homeless, whereas I always used to feel so comfortable being active in all kinds of movements, and I'm not anymore. And I met with, with Rabbi Lehman, that I want to do programming, but I don't know what to do because I don't feel welcome in a lot of these spaces anymore. So I then met with the rabbi from the JCRC, Rabbi Abby, and she told me a story. So let me tell you a story about this woman who did this amazing thing. And so I called her and we had a Zoom call, and then I said, can you come to our synagogue? And part of it is to talk about her organization, which I hope you will all donate to after this. And part of it is to say how she got from where she was to where she is now, basically being motivated by the same feeling that a lot of us are having. That's all I'm gonna say.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for having me here today and for coming out on a blustery afternoon. I will try to do my best to both figure out where to stand and talk to you all on Zoom and talk to everyone in the room. I'm a bit of a wanderer anyway, so that works out really well. For those of you who have not got it yet, there is a sign-in sheet going around, so if you get it, just keep passing it along. But again, thank you so much for being here this afternoon. I am just over the, I don't know, Bridge 95 Beltway, what have you, from Arlington, Virginia. I've been in the DMV for about 25 years. And so it's really nice when I get to do things in my own community. And even though my community is across the bridge, I still feel like the DMV is very much all connected, particularly when it comes to this issue. And I will explain what I mean by that. My name is Allison Korman. I am the founder and executive director of the Red Tent Fund, which is a Jewish abortion fund. To my knowledge, the first ever Jewish direct service abortion fund. There are lots of organizations, great organizations like National Council of Jewish Women who do work at the intersection of Judaism and reproductive health. But as far as I know, we are the first ever organization that is working directly as a direct service organization, is what we call it in our type of work, with abortion seekers. I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about me and about Red Tent Fund and why I felt like it had to be created. What I love about a group this size is that we can make this a conversation. So if I say something and you're like, I don't know what that means, raise your hand. If you know, a brilliant question pops into your head, please just raise your hand. And I would love to have this be a dialogue, and I'm sure nobody wants to be talked at for series. So, to kind of set the stage for you, I am a public health professional. I did my master's up in Baltimore at Johns Hopkins. And ever since I graduated that program, I have been really committed to sexual and reproductive health. And this is my passion. This is my thing that gets me out of bed in the morning. And I've been really, really lucky that over the course of 25 years, I've been able to work on this issue from a variety of different vantage points. I started out working with an association of healthcare providers, so I was working with doctors and midwives and PAs and midwives. Then I was doing some international work with USAID and CDC, doing maternal and child health work overseas. Then I was doing sexual violence and reproductive health prevention. Well, sexual violence and yeah, it's Sunday morning, I know. I mean, this is my whole life for 7 years, SBPR, and I can't even spit the words out this morning, I'm so sorry. Sexual violence prevention and response on college and university campuses and some K-12 work. And after that last role, which I did for about 7 years, leading a national initiative to end campus sexual violence, I kind of was thinking, okay, I'm ready to take another move. And I feel really lucky that I've been able to work from so many different vantage points in my field. Not everyone is so lucky to be able to do this. But I feel like it's really given me a sense of, wow, this is all the work in SVPR, sexual violence prevention and response, and how it's connected. And so I was thinking about what my next move was going to be. And this was 2020, oh God, I was meeting 2020, more or less, no, 2021, 22. And Roe v. Wade had not yet been overturned, but the writing was on the wall. If you worked in this field, it was starting to feel like it was a matter of when, not if. Hi, welcome. You're so fine. Just welcome, we're just getting started. And so I made the decision that I really wanted to work specifically and exclusively on abortion in this country. First time ever just digging deep into abortion. And I took a job with the DC Abortion Fund. Has anyone ever heard of the DC Abortion Fund? Some yeses, some no's. Does anyone know what an abortion fund is or does?
It's a place a woman who can't afford or can't arrange for an abortion can get assistance.
That's exactly right. Abortion funds are historically grassroots organizations in a local community that raises money to help pay for the cost of abortion procedures for people who can't afford them. The reason this is so important is because abortion is one of the only, frankly, as far as I can figure out, aside from elective procedures that we're taking elective aside, because there are lots of situations where yes, abortion is elective, and there's lots of times where it is absolutely essential for protective health. It is healthcare meant to save the life of the pregnant person, or if we're thinking about an ectopic pregnancy or lots of other scenarios. That aside, abortion is really the only healthcare where you are expected to show up dollar in hand and be able to pay out of pocket, because depending on where you live and what state you're in, you may or may not be able to access insurance through your state health insurance. It may or may not be required through employer health insurance. It really differs by every state in the nation and what those laws are. But because of something called the Hyde Amendment, which is a national piece of legislation that prevented any federal funding to go to pay for abortions, it is really hard to access assistance for abortion funding in this country, particularly so in certain places. So when a person finds themselves wanting or needing an abortion, they also often find themselves needing money to help pay for it. Any guesses on what a first trimester abortion, either surgical or medication, costs these days?
$1,000.
Okay. Anyone else? How much? 500. 500? Oh, bingo, bingo, like Price is Right rules, right? You got the number without going over. So for a first trimester abortion, if you're looking at a medication or a surgical procedure, you're looking at $500 to $700, depending on where you are and where you're being seen. If you start talking about a second trimester abortion, you could be looking at 1,200 or 2,000 range. And if you're looking at abortion in all trimesters, all tri-care, which is something I'm happy to talk to people about, it's the third rail of abortion, and I just came from a national abortion conference where we had our own conversation about all tri-care and how even for those of us who do this work, it can be still a challenge. But I feel really strongly about it. I supported my cousin and her husband through a abortion very late in pregnancy for a very wanted, very loved pregnancy that was unfortunately not medically viable, and it just really opened up, it allowed my head and my heart to get in the same place on this issue. But if you're talking about an abortion, later in care, it could be upwards of $10,000. And there's some data from, hi, welcome. You're in the right place, grab a seat. There is some data from our government that says for the average American, 1 in 3, if they had an unexpected expense of $400, they would either need to borrow money or sell some of their belongings. So when you think about the fact that a first trimester abortion, either medication or surgical, is financially out of reach for so many people in this country, you then understand why abortion funds need to exist. And they are all over the country. Some states have multiple abortion funds, some states have one. The DC Abortion Fund has been operating in the DC area, helping people living in or traveling to the DMV for about, I want to say 30, 35 years, something like that. So, cut back to my story. I'm taking this job at the DC Abortion Fund. I'm over the moon. I'm so excited to be doing abortion work specifically in my own community. After working internationally for many years, it was so nice to literally be doing work in my own backyard. And everything was great until it wasn't. And like so many other people like myself who worked in progressive spaces, everything changed on October 7th. And I know for all of us in the room, everything changed on October 7th. I did not expect my professional life to change overnight. So October 7th happens. I don't hear from any of my colleagues. We're a small organization. There's probably about 5 staff and a board, and nobody reaches out, and that's fine. That's not their job. That's not their responsibility. But everyone knows I'm Jewish, because anytime there was a fundraiser in Maryland, in Rockville, in Bethesda, guess who got asked to go speak, right, at those events? And I was happy to do it. It's my people. Of course I'll go to Bethesda and talk about, raising money for the DC Abortion Fund. So no big secret that I'm Jewish, but I don't hear from anybody. It's fine. Got enough going on with our own community. October 9th, it's a Monday. It is Indigenous Peoples Day. And the DC DCAP social media manager goes online and posts something about Indigenous Peoples Day and how we all need to give the land back to the Indigenous people, and hashtags it at the bottom, hashtag free Gaza, hashtag free Palestine, hashtag land back. And I went to her and I said, hey, I don't know if you are aware, but this weekend we had something really tragic happen in the Jewish community. And this message feels really tone deaf to me and just not necessary and kind of hurtful, and she begrudgingly took it down. We went back and forth a little bit and she begrudgingly took it down. But this really set the stage for the next 6 weeks of this organization. Keep in mind, there's 5 or 6 staff, there's a board of another 10 or so people. I'm the only Jewish person in the organization. And so the various people in the organization keep coming and saying, we want to post about this. We want to post about what's happening in Gaza. And my response, and I am the executive director in everything but name. When they hired us as co-leaders. Has anyone tried running an organization with 3 people at the top? It's a hoot. It is a hoot. And actually within 6 months, we went to the board and we said, this is really hard. We have no training in running an organization in a shared leadership model. And they said, great, we're going to promote Allie to the most senior director. So you're the most senior, but you're not executive director. Because had I been executive director, I would have made a unilateral decision and I would have said, you don't have to like it. But my decision as executive director is we're not getting into this. We're a local abortion fund. We have nothing to add to the conversation that will be additive on events in the Middle East. This is not our lane. This is not our expertise. But I did not have the authority to do that. So that explains why people kept coming to me and saying, hey, we want to post about this. And I kept saying, I really don't think this is our area. And people don't give us money to opine on geopolitics. They give us money to fund abortion in the DMV. But I kept getting pushback and pushback and pushback. And I wasn't going to win this fight. And I had no one on my side. It was everybody on one side and me on the other. But where I stuck my foot out and said, or my neck out, I guess is the expression, or my foot down, take a grip, Is I said, if I'm going to lose this fight, and if this organization is going to say something about the events happening in the Middle East, and you are so adamant that we talk about what is happening in Gaza as reproductive injustice, then you also have to talk about what happened on October 7th and rape as a weapon of war and hostage taking and murdering of families and children as reproductive injustice. For those who are not familiar with it, reproductive justice is a framework that has dominated the reproductive health movement for the last 30 years or so. And it was coined by a group of Black feminist advocates who said that it's not just so much that you should have rights, and it's not so much that you should just have access, you should have reproductive justice. And that means any person should have the right to have a family if they want to have a family, not have one if they don't, and have the ability to raise that family in a safe and healthy and sustainable community. So that's where all of the movement from the abortion and reproductive rights groups came from. Well, this is not reproductive justice. You can't raise a safe and healthy family if you're being bombed or you're being, under siege, occupied, what have you. I don't argue with that. But I also don't think you can have reproductive justice if you're taking people hostage and using rape as a weapon of war. And that's where the rubber really hit the road with my colleagues. And it just became a completely untenable situation. People were canceling meetings with me. People were refusing to speak with me. We have a lovely demo up here because we have Zoom. So at the time, the organization was an all remote organization. We were spread around the DMV and we met each week on Zoom for a staff meeting or for independent meetings. And it got to the point where my colleagues, we would log on for the staff meeting, all 6 of us or what have you, and mine would be the only camera that would be on. All of them would have their cameras off because they refused to look at me or have me see them. So if they were trying to send me the message that I was an island of one and that I wasn't welcome, message received, they made it very clear. And eventually I could not, it was not tenable. I think I'm a pretty resilient person. I come from a good Ashkenazi German Jewish lineage, and like, you're having a bad day, tough luck, get out of bed and just like face the day. There's not really an option. That's kind of how I was raised. By the end of this 6 weeks of going back and forth with my colleagues and my board, I couldn't get out of bed in the morning because there was no point in getting out of bed and going to work for 8 hours and having these fights and these disagreements, and then trying to after work process what we were all processing about October 7th and how our community felt unsafe and how we felt unwelcome. And I think I just hit a point where I said, there's no trust to come back to. Even if we can get over this hump, there's no trust. And I think it's really interesting that none of my colleagues, not one, ever asked me, Allie, you've been to Israel. What are your thoughts on what's happening over there? What are your thoughts on the Israeli government, on settlements, on Gaza, on anything? No one once asked me a question. They just assumed that they knew where I stood and that what I believed was at odds inherently with at odds with being a good reproductive justice person. So I resigned. This was like November 6th or something like that. I left a message for my board chair and said, I've given it a lot of thought and I think that this is, not sustainable and I'm tendering my resignation. And she texted me back later that morning and said, I understand that decaf is no longer a fit for you, which I took to mean, don't let the door hit you on your way out. Thank you so much for solving this problem for us. You're leaving. And so I took a couple months to get my feet back under me. And I really thought really long and hard about what I was going to do, because I've spent 25 years doing reproductive health work. It is the thing that I love and that I'm passionate about. And I really had doubts about whether I should leave the movement entirely and what was I going to go do with. How do I wasn't planning on starting a new career 25 years in, but this is what I was kind of faced with a choice. And then I hit that stage of whatever the 7 stages of grief are, that was the anger phase. And I was like, leaving. This is nonsense. I do not have to leave my fields. I have given just as much to this field as anyone else, and I'm not leaving. And so I went online and I wrote an article that ended up getting published in a online Jewish magazine about my experience and just talking and cataloging everything from October 7th until my resignation, and even the ways in which the organization to continue to double and triple down after I left. Please know that I was not the only Jewish person raising my hand and saying this is a problem. You had a lot of those same donors that I was talking about from Bethesda and the Jewish community at large, who were separately writing to the fund saying, I saw what you posted on such and such date. I really have a problem with that. Hey, I've been a major donor for 10 years. Can we talk about what you are saying and how you are positioning this organization? They were not interested. So this was not just a me problem. But after I wrote that article, I just heard this swell of response from all across the country, from people in reproductive health, from people in abortion, from people in other progressive causes, climate, immigration, food insecurity, unhoused, you name it, saying, oh my gosh, you put words to the thing that I've been feeling in my movement or my job, and I thought I was the only one experiencing this. And it, sadly for me, I feel like it was both reassuring to see that I was not the only one, and I'm glad I could be a source of support to folks and say like, no, you're not alone, this is happening all over. But I was really heartened to see how much it was specifically coming from the reproductive health and abortion access movement. I don't want to say it's uniquely our problem, but we really have the market cornered on being like problematic. And I will say, for some people, anti-Zionist, which very quickly led into anti-Semitic. My former organization really doubled and tripled down after I left. They went on the record with journalists and said things like, we have problems with these donors with power and money who blah, 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 blah. And I thought, gosh, you don't even know what you just said right there. Or you do, and you said it anyway, and I don't know which is worse.
And weren't they dependent on people with power and money?
They lose Marie.
They sure did.
Good.
They sure did. But that's the double-edged sword, because guess who was the Jew who took the money away from the abortion seekers? Not, mind you, this is the community who you turned your back on such that they felt like they didn't have a home in this space anymore, and you pushed them out. No. This Jewish woman wrote an article about her experience in our movement, and now these abortion funds are not getting funded in the way they were before. And I thought a lot about those criticisms and a lot about the fact that I know so many Jewish people, my family, my own congregation, people like you all who care about this issue. And I thought, well, if we all turn around and walk away and stop funding these organizations, the only people who are going to suffer are abortion seekers. And so I tinkered around with the idea of what would it mean to create a Jewish abortion fund. And again, I know NCJW raises money for abortion. They raise that money and then they pass it through to direct service organizations, but not to Jewish organizations because there weren't any at that time doing direct service. They were giving to abortion orgs, but none were specifically Jewish. And I thought, we have so many other examples of the way that we in this community live our social justice values Jewishly, right? We give to Highest because we want to help immigrants and refugees. We give to, God, the name of the Mazon, sorry, again, Sunday morning. We give to Mazon because we want to help with food insecurity and we want to do it Jewishly. And there was no way to really do that. And I thought, okay, I've been in this movement for as long as I have, but there must be a Jewish abortion fund. And somehow, even though I'm Jewish and even though I work in the abortion world, I just somehow have missed it this whole time. It must exist. And I did the research and it didn't. And so I made the decision to start the Red Tent Fund in the article published in April of 24. We launched, we got our 501c3, we applied for a 501c3 status in May. We were granted it in August. And by September, we were funding abortion. So we moved very, very quickly. And I say we because it sounds nice and it sounds like the, royal we. There was no way. It was me, It was my husband, who's a comms guy by training, and so I was like, great, you know how to do communications, help me make a brand and a website, and it has very quickly grown to be something that the Jewish community has embraced beyond my wildest dreams. So, I'm gonna stop there and I'll tell you a little bit more about what we do and how much of an impact we've made in the last almost 2 years, but I've just given you a lot and I wanna take some time to say, does anyone have any questions? Has anyone been going through something similarly?
Well, how would you have answered that question, how you feel about the Israeli government going on in Gaza? And if you've been given the chance, I'd like to hear
Sure.
your response.
Absolutely. I would have said, I've been to Israel many times. I have family and friends in Israel. It's a deeply imperfect country, as is every country. But I'm not here to quibble or question its right to exist. This is not theoretical. It exists. It is a country. Do I have problems with some of the policies? Absolutely. Want to have a conversation about those policies? Love to. But I'm not here to debate whether or not it has a right to exist and it has a right to defend itself.
Have you had any pushback from Planned Parenthood?
No, not to me, not to Red Tent Fund. Planned Parenthood is such a massive organization. Frankly, I don't even know if I'm on their radar. I know that I'm on individual people at Planned Parenthood's radar, particularly people who are Jewish, but as an entity, I don't know that they have given a lot of thought. But Planned Parenthood has had to cross their own bridges when it comes to this. There's Planned Parenthood National, which is based here in DC and New York and does advocacy and lobbying and education and clinic, has the kind of clinic piece. But then there's each individual affiliate clinic, and those are each operated independently. And so some of those clinic affiliates have made the decision to say nothing since October 7th. And some of them have either knowingly or unknowingly really stepped in it and had to deal with a lot of pushback from Jewish donors, from donors in general. A lot of the people who come and find Red Tent tell me, I went to my local Planned Parenthood event and there was like 7 people in keffiyehs and I just was like, I couldn't do it anymore. Like I just couldn't do it anymore. So I don't think that there's been pushback. I think that we occupy different spaces and do different work. And there's definitely enough room and enough need to fund abortion that we can all do what we do. But I think we bring in a specific type of person who wants to make sure that the abortion fund they're supporting only focuses on domestic abortion funding through Jewish funds.
When you wrote your article, did you get any positive responses from non-Jews?
Well, it's funny, I pitched my article in all secular outlets first. Because I thought, Jews know there's a problem. The Jews don't need to read about this. They know there's a problem. So I tried pitching it to the Washington Post and the New York Times and the Free Press. And again, I had the benefit of a husband who had worked for 15 years pitching media in the State Department. So I wasn't doing this alone. I had a lot of people in my corner helping me get to these outlets. And they were not biting. And they were not interested. And eventually a friend who is a pretty big influencer in the Jewish space offered to put me in touch with this magazine, and within 30 minutes they took it. And I'm really happy they did, because the truth is this was the right place for it to land. I think if it had landed in a secular publication, people would have flipped through it and go, that's interesting. But the fact that it got into a Jewish publication is why I think I got such a massive response. And so I'm very grateful for the way things worked out, even if it wasn't the way I initially intended.
I have a question and a
Yeah.
comment. So my question is, do you, help all women or just, okay? And then, my comment is that I have been so surprised at how, progressive kind of people who defend, underdogs, who people in need, how quickly they went from being against what Israel is doing to anti-Semitism, just blatant anti-Semitism. And it's been shocking, but it's been in there and they were just holding it back.
I think that I really choose to believe that my former colleagues started their positioning from a place of anti-Zionism, and I think it morphed into anti-Semitism very quickly under their feet, and I'm not even sure they recognized
2
it.
days later. I mean, there are people who claim that a lot of their pro-Palestinian is because of all of the, what Israel, the bombing and all that, but none of that had even.
Yeah.
So they started out that way.
Yes, and it was the only international issue that they had opined. I mean, once in a while you'd see, Ireland or Mexico, expanding the right to abortion, and we would post something that's like, yes, more access in these countries. But that was it. There was no like, hey, we're here to talk about Sudan. We're here to talk about the Uyghurs. We're here to talk about, anything. This was the first time they had ever gone hard. And just recently, just last week, I went to my first abortion only conference. I've spent a lot of time in Jewish spaces and Jewish abortion spaces since I launched Red Tent, but this was my first abortion only conference. And I really felt the way that my entire body was in like fight, flight, or freeze mode the entire time, because I kept waiting for someone to walk up to me. And people saw my badge, and you say right here, I'm Allison Korman, I'm from the Red Tent Fund, and I absolutely saw people be like, oh, I'm not talking to her, which is fine, I'm okay with that. But I was waiting for something worse to happen. Thankfully it didn't. But yeah, there continue to be a ton of kafiyas, and look over and everyone's got that's a hyperbole. Excuse me. People have stickers on their water bottle, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And I just was like, okay, focus on the abortion. That's why you're here. So it was a challenging couple of days, and I'm glad I got through the first one.
Just to, like, maybe, I didn't understand this until you explained it to me, because I didn't really understand what abortion funds were, but Planned Parenthood is not a competition. You will still fund abortions, and people can have them performed at Planned Parenthood. If they are a service provider, you are a fund. But when you interact, but you don't provide the same thing. So there's the funding, and then there are service providers.
That's exactly right. They are the service providers, which once upon a time I had thought maybe I could be a provider, but blood does bad things to me, so that was a quick no. Yes, we are the funding mechanism, and we fund a little bit differently than a lot of the abortion funds out there. Historically, the way abortion funds have worked, I think a lot in part because these were grassroots organizations that have been around, many of them for 30 years. It looks very different after the fall of Roe, when you have people traveling across state lines, traveling to entire different states to get care. But a lot of them started out as these very hyper local things where you would call your local abortion fund, someone would pick up the phone and would say, okay, you need $500 for a procedure, we got you. It's a little more complicated now because the landscape is more complicated. It's bigger, it's more diffuse. So now when a patient calls an abortion fund, whether it's DC Abortion Fund or the Abortion Fund of Maryland, which used to be Baltimore Abortion Fund, but they rebranded, what you will get is you will get a patient calling and either leaving a message or someone answers the phone and asking them a lot of questions about where they're coming from and how far along are you and what's your cost and what can you pay, and have you called this other national abortion fund to see if they can pay. It's a lot of administrative and emotional labor for the patient, because they may have to call multiple abortion funds to piece together all the funding and tell those stories or these data points over and over again. And it's not necessarily, there's not a great map for how to do this. You kind of got to figure it out as you go, and it's exhausting. We do things a little differently. We started out thinking we'd have a caller warm line. I started out thinking we'd have a caller warm line because that's what you do. That's what I know from DC Abortion Fund. But the reality is we raised a lot of money in a short amount of time, and I didn't yet have my person hired to be that person on the phone. And so I started doing what's called block grants. And so for the clinics where I had relationships, at the beginning of the month, I give you $5,000 and you $5,000, and you're in Illinois, and so you have a huge patient population because that's a hub of abortion work. So I'm going to give you 10,000, and as we go. And then when someone calls you to make your appointment, or you walk in the door and you say, hey, I'm here, but I'm $300 short, rather than having to send that patient home to go fundraise or piece together that $300, they say, no problem, we have funding from the Red Tent Fund, or maybe they don't say that, they just say, we have funding. We got you, and the patient can be seen that day, and then next month, I send you another $5,000, and I send you another $10,000, and if 1 month you don't spend it all, you roll it over the next month, and if 1 month you spend too much of it, and you need more, you call me, and I tell you if I can get you more that month. So that's the way we do things. We work a little differently. So that means we don't have that direct connection to patients as much. Every once in a while, we get a phone call, an email, a voicemail, absolutely, from the person who Googles the right combination of words and is like, hi, I need help. And then in that case, our programs person does call them back and will help pledge them. But how we normally do it is we have about a dozen clinic partners all around the country with about 17 locations amongst them, and we send them the money every month. To your point, we mostly fund independent abortion clinics. So those are clinics that are not Planned Parenthoods and not hospitals. The reason being, those are standalone abortion clinics. They do not have the benefit of the infrastructure of a hospital or a Planned Parenthood to back them up. Generally, what happens when someone shows up in an indie clinic and they can't afford their procedure is the clinic will find a way to discount it until the patient can be seen, which is great for the patient, but really bad for the financial viability of the clinic. So that's why we focus almost exclusively on independent clinics. But if we do get a phone call from someone who is being seen at Planned Parenthood, or if the people that we work with who help arrange rides and train tickets and bus tickets and gas reimbursements and lodging for a patient call us and say, hey, we have this patient, we can get them to where they need to be, but they can't pay for the whole procedure, we can step in and help fill that gap. Yeah.
Have you, you're a model for your industry. Have you had anyone reach out to you for a similar model in other industries where people are being attacked for what they're doing?
Yes, I have. I came from, directly and indirectly. I just came from a really interesting convening a couple of months ago in Louisville, Kentucky, of all places, to gather the Jews. I had no idea there was such a large Jewish population in Louisville. They have a really interesting mayor. He's a second Jewish mayor. He survived a assassination attempt. So yes, a Jewish foundation brought together probably 150 of us in Louisville, Kentucky, in 5 major buckets. We were higher education, K-12, arts and culture, ERGs, like employee.
Environmental.
No, ERGs, like in big companies where they have like the Jewish affinity group or the Black affinity group, or like they're, I forget what it stands for. But if you work in a huge corporation, you might have those affinity groups, and there's people who lead those. And then the last was Jews in secular spaces. And everyone at that conference was invited because they had, after October 7th, either had to leave their existing entity, whatever that may be, or they started something new that didn't exist before October 7th because they felt unwelcome in what previously existed. So I spoke to a lot of people there who were familiar with my story. I get phone calls all the time or emails from people all the time. I got one this weekend, actually, which I was really disheartened about because I kind of thought we were at the tail end of this. I thought we were kind of coming out the other side, and a woman wrote to me and said, I'm Jewish. I just got dismissed without cause from my position at my local abortion fund. I'm trying to reach Allison. Can you please send her this message? So it's still happening, and I think we're seeing a lot of people in groups who are setting up red tent-like things where they say, okay, you don't want us, we're going to create our own version of this. But this is not a new story, right? I mean, we did this how many years ago, how many decades ago, when we created the Jewish hospitals and the Jewish social clubs and the Jewish universities and the Jewish law firms. And so this, I think, is just the next iteration of that response to this. Yeah.
But you service anyone, and do you have any, I'm sure you do the data on like, are more of your clients Jewish or have you?
Great question. We absolutely serve anyone. To me, that is inherently Jewish. I'm not here to tell anyone else how their Jewish values work in their life, but for me, it would not be Jewish and it would not be aligned with who my Jewish upbringing has made me to be, to say I will only fund Jewish people. So I'm really proud of the fact that we fund anyone. And we very explicitly do not ask what religion someone is. In fact, we ask almost no questions, as few as we can get away with, from the clinics to serve our patients. Because, as I'm sure you are aware, abortion is becoming increasingly criminalized in this country. So the more data I have about who someone is, the more I can tie it specifically, our money went to you, and here's where you live and all the things, the more dangerous that is for all of us. So we try to make sure that our clinics are not asking any questions that they wouldn't already be asking those patients. So we don't ask them, hey, can you ask them 10 extra things for us? It's like, okay, you collect this data, great, that's what we'll take. So what we do now, we're just past our first full year of funding. We launched in, like I said, like fall of 2024, we started funding around then, but 2025 was our first full year of funding abortion. And we just put out our impact report this past Thursday. And what we know is in 2025 alone, we funded over 1,400 patients. We funded over $500,000 in abortion procedures. Our patients came from 41 states and territories. They were about half self-identified as Black or African American, about another 15% Latina, 50% white, another whatever the rest of that difference is to 100 did not want to provide that information. So we don't know to what extent we are funding Jews, but what I can tell you is this. We are not exempt from this problem. And when I go into synagogues and I give these talks, sometimes what I hear, English major, y'all. Sometimes what I hear is, well, this isn't a concern for our community because our kids, our grandkids will always get to where they need to be. And I think, wow, that is a really lovely but not accurate and misguided way to think about this issue. Makes a lot of assumptions. First of all, as I told you, I supported my cousin who's very much Jewish, her husband through an abortion later in pregnancy, because who has $10,000 laying around for a medical procedure that they didn't anticipate needing and that they desperately don't want. Also, it makes a lot of assumptions that children and grandchildren are going to tell you that they need that help. And I think that is misguided, right? That every single Jewish kid is going to go to their parents or grandparents and say, hey, I'm in this situation, I need help. We funded a patient, and this is all kind of hearsay, so bear with me. Our programs person lives in New York City. She is very involved in the Jewish community there. I did not know this, but she somehow figured this out. She was looking at her data and she was able to discern, because all we collect is a zip code. She was able to discern that one of the patients we funded, I believe at Partners in Abortion Care, which is in Maryland, which is an all-tri clinic, was coming from one of the all Hasidic neighborhoods in Westchester, right? Westchester or Rockland County. And I was like, well, how do we know that this is like, has to be a Jewish person? And I Googled, I was like, what do you mean zip code? And I was like, oh yeah, this is probably a Hasidic person. Okay. I don't know who they are. I don't have their name. I don't have their information, but based on their zip code alone, I think it's really safe to say that we know that we are meeting all people, regardless of their religion, regardless of their politics or their, identity, what have you. Yeah.
I was wondering, are you involved with the morning after pill funding that, or just for procedures?
Great question. So right now we are only funding surgical procedures. The legal risk of criminality, being sued, either civilly or criminally, is greater when you start funding medication abortion. And the reason is this. procedural abortion or surgical abortion, as it's called, takes place all in one day, all in one sitting, all in the spot where the clinic is. If you're going to be seen at Partners, or any, let's say, any clinic in Maryland, you're going in pregnant and you're leaving not pregnant. And we can say with a great deal of certainty that your pregnancy took place in a state where abortion is legal. The medication abortion pill works a little differently. You take the first pill, and you wait 24 hours, and then you take the second dose of your pill. And there is legal uncertainty with what's to stop someone from taking the first pill in Maryland and then driving back to West Virginia or Tennessee or North Carolina. So we've been working with our attorneys to figure out how can we start funding medication abortion in a way that is as risk preventative as possible. And we're just now starting to get to that. And we're bringing a proposal to the board in the coming weeks to start providing funding for medication abortion in certain clinics, where we have reason to believe that we will be less at risk. Over time, I'd love to build our risk tolerance to a place where we are funding medication abortion in more places. But that's a very long way of answering your question, which is saying there is nothing wrong with funding the morning after pill. It is pregnancy prevention, not an abortifacient. And there's a lot of misinformation out there about how Plan B or the morning after pill works. It is actually post-exposure contraception, not an abortifacient. So there really would be no issue with funding it, other than we are small and we gotta stay very, very great, very focused on this one thing before we spread too far too fast.
Can you explain how NCJW works in relation to the work you're doing?
Yes, absolutely. So NCJW, the National Council of Jewish Women, I say there would be no red tent without them, and that's for a couple of reasons. They were the ones who first started having conversations. I can remember it was 10, 15 years ago, exactly when they started, about the intersection of Judaism and reproductive health. So I think they really laid the groundwork for an organization like Red Tent Fund to exist. They work at both the national level, doing lobbying, education, policy, as well as at the local or chapter. I think they call it a section, but they're changing that naming, I believe. So more of like the local way. Whenever we come to a city, our first call is to that NCJW chapter. And it's like, hi, we're the Red Tent Fund. We would love to work with you. We're going to come into your city and we're planning on doing an event. Can we partner with you? Can we, share this opportunity together? And some sections are super down and some sections are like, no, good. Like we do our own thing. It just really depends. They're all really independent. But the Jewish Fund for Abortion Access, which is run through NCJW National, is a fundraising arm entity where they raise money for abortion and then they give it to direct service organizations. They may give it to a practical support organization who's funding rides and hotels and whatnot for people who are traveling for abortion care. They may give it to a specific clinic. They may give it to an abortion fund. We have been talking with them since we launched, and certainly my hope that we will be the recipient of funding from the Jewish Fund for Abortion Access, soon.
So how, do you know how they have dealt with this post-October 7th world with these other organizations like DC Abortion Fund, and like, are they supporting them still? I guess it's like, how are they reconciling?
They are, and I say this like with all due respect, kudos to, Sheila Katz, right, has been leading NCJW for a long time. She just stepped down not too long ago. Sheila, I think did a phenomenal job of staying in coalition with these other organizations. Like, I think everybody needs to do the thing. We need to take a variety of approaches, I guess is what I'm saying. I left DCAF and started Red Tent Fund. That's really important so that people can have a place to give Jewishly and do this work. It's also really important that Sheila stayed at the table with some of those coalition partners and remained in dialogue with them and found opportunities to educate them on things maybe they didn't know about, or to explain to them why certain language they were using was problematic. And I genuinely believe we need all of those different approaches working in concert to be able to make this movement work. So they tackled it a little differently, but I'm so glad they did, because I could not have stayed and continued to have that conversation. It was no longer useful.
What percentage of your donors are Jewish?
Probably, I don't have the data. We don't ask explicitly. I would venture 98%. Every time we do like an in-home event where someone has Red Tent Fund to their living room, they always invite their non-Jewish best friend from up the street, and invariably that person corners me and they're like, "I'm not Jewish, why should I give to the Red Tent Fund?" And I'm like, "Great, I love this question, challenge accepted." And what I say to them is, there's a million ways to support reproductive health and abortion in this country. You should choose the one that feels most aligned to you. We are a Jewish abortion fund in the sense that we are guided by the laws and teachings that affirm the right to abortion in our original text, right? We just had Parshat Mishpatim back in February, where we read the original text where a lot of the scholarly discussions are pulled from. So I say we approach this from a Jewish perspective, but I believe that our values are universal values. They are the values of taking care of your community. They are the values of dignity, of respect, excuse me. They are the values of, we are not here to provide a litmus test of saying who gets to come in and who gets to come out. If you care about our values and you want to fund an abortion fund that is only going to focus on domestic abortion funding and not get distracted by anything outside those guardrails, whether it's in the Middle East or even here in this country, and I'll give you an example in a second, I'm like, we're a great place for you to fund because our money is going directly to abortion clinics who are serving patients. And I don't think I've had anyone tell me like that answer doesn't make sense to them yet. But I say we stay very closely in those guardrails because that to me was a lesson learned from DC Abortion Fund and lots of other people in progressive spaces after October 7th. I think they saw some, and frankly, we saw this after George Floyd, right? We saw lots of companies, whether they had a specific investment in the issues of racial justice in this country, taking the position, and I understand why. There's, racial diversity in the whole country, so that was a little easier to understand. But there was just so many organizations who had nothing to do with the work of what was happening in the Middle East who took positions, and I think it only did a disservice to them. And so I'm very clear about asking myself anytime an opportunity comes along, does this have to do with domestic abortion funding through a Jewish lens? And our social media person, our contractor, lives in Minneapolis. And a couple of months ago, when Minneapolis was absolutely besieged by ICE, still is as far as I understand, came to me and said, can we post something as Red 10 about what's happening here in Minneapolis? And I thought about it and I really searched my soul and I was like, hey, Allie, who doesn't run this organization, of course wants to say yes. But Allie, who runs this organization, promised herself and her board and her donors that I would only do this thing. I said, if you can find me an article about people who are not going to get their abortion procedures or are not getting health care because they are scared to go out in Minneapolis and they are going to be detained, that we will post. And she was like, okay, got it. And we haven't had like a specific article on people who haven't been getting abortion care because of fear of ICE, although I suspect that's coming because I have no doubt that it is in fact a reality. But we absolutely have seen people who are postponing or denying health care because they're afraid to leave there.
So, did you get any pushback from other abortion organizations that had the money pulled out and given to you?
When we launched, they've quieted down since. They've quieted down. I like to believe they've moved on to their next target, or they have no choice but to deal with the fact that we are doing what we said we would do and doing it really well and becoming one of the fastest growing abortion funds in the country. But when we first launched, our social media was besieged by just awful comments. I mean, there's things about me on the internet. How dare this, what my favorites is like the caucasity of this white Zionist woman to, go start another abortion fund. One comment that I really didn't understand was, when we launched on our socials, like, stay away from Black and brown abortion seekers.
Oh,
I don't even know what that means. I'm like, so you don't want me to fund Black and brown people? I thought that was the whole point. I thought we were funding people who need funding. They came pretty hard in the comments, and they have their own chats where Red Tent and myself are being talked about, but I luckily don't see too much of that. I really think that I'm focused on doing really good work that no one can debate the value of. That's my best response to all of that. And one of the biggest criticisms I heard when I launched Red Tent Fund was, oh, great, now there's just 101 abortion funds that abortion seekers have to call. And I'm like, well, joke's on you. Abortion seekers don't have to call us. They just have to call the clinic, which they're doing anyway, and then they get our money. So, gotcha.
Independent abortion providers are there in the country, or what percentage does that kind of make up vis-a-vis
Mhm.
Planned Parenthood and so?
I don't know how many independent providers there are off the top of my head. There's a fabulous report that you can read from ACN, the Abortion Care Network, and they are the umbrella association of independent abortion providers. And they produce a report every year, as far as I know, every year, called Communities Need Clinics, and it talks about the state of independent abortion providers in the country. And what surprises most people is that indies provide the majority of abortion care in this country. They provide about 60%, and that's just like generally, but when you look at someone who needs second or even third try care, it's almost all indies, maybe some hospitals, but Planned Parenthood, by and large, like if you need an abortion after 20 weeks, it is rare that you're gonna find a Planned Parenthood who can provide that level of care for you. But you can go to Partners in Abortion Care, or you can go to the DuPont Clinic and DuPont Circle, or a handful of other clinics that are around the country. It's incredibly specialized care. It's incredibly complex. There's not a ton of people who are qualified to do it, and the people who do it, I truly believe are like doing the work of like doing holy work. And in fact, when I was in California, I sat on a panel with an all-try abortion provider, and someone asked, who's Jewish, and they asked her the question, like, how did you get into doing all-try work? And she was like, well, I talked to my rabbi, and I feel like I have what I need emotionally to know that I am doing good work, that I'm doing work that matters and that is needed, and I have my Jewish faith to support me in that, and not everybody has that, and so I feel like I am called to do this work because I can. Which I thought was beautiful.
Yeah. You mentioned, I think, that you are partners with 17?
A dozen clinics with 17 locations among them, it's a little
Okay.
confusing.
So that's a significant number of independent clinics that I'm going to guess in the country. Is that as many as there used to be?
There's not as many as there used to be, that's a good question, I don't know what percentage it is. I'm gonna guess a fifth, maybe?
That's a lot.
Maybe a fifth of all the indie clinics out there. But we are constantly trying to expand to new clinics. The challenge is, once we start funding a clinic, we want to be able to fund them in perpetuity. I
And
don't
they
want
you to be able to.
They want me to be able to, because they can count on that money from Red Tent clearing every single month. And so in order to bring on a new clinic, it's not that I need to raise $5,000 in 1 month, that I can do. I need to be able to raise $60,000 over the course of a year for each clinic we serve. So I don't bring on a new partner clinic until I know that we have the financial runway to do so and be able to fund them, at least for a year, if not more. But I never want a clinic to have to call me and be like, where's my money this month? Oh, sorry, we had a bad fundraising month. Like, we're not gonna be able to get you that. We're not doing that. They depend on us to be dependable.
Yeah. You also have a lot of indie clinics that want your funding.
We have a list, we have a waiting list of people who are like waiting to get funded, and we're like, you're next, you're the next in line to get funding. And we are also starting to think about doing a little bit of practical support. There's a couple of our clinic partners who have folks on staff who help arrange a ride or a hotel or a plane ticket or a bus ticket or a gas reimbursement. And we are starting to carve off a little bit of money each month so that they can fund that as well, because that is another barrier to care. It's not just, can you pay for the abortion once you get there? It's, how are you gonna get there? And how are you gonna stay in the city? Let's say you're coming here for a 2-day procedure, you might need a hotel, you might need childcare back home, you're in a strange place, where are you gonna like get food from? Like, is it a grocery store? Do you need to DoorDash? How are you gonna do this? So we're trying to help with that too.
First of all, I'm very impressed by what you've accomplished,
Yeah.
especially having had to deal with what you dealt with.
Thank you.
Um,
I can't sit still, I'm a doer, I'm like, all right, what are we doing?
my question is, just out of curiosity, since you're directly funding the clinics, do patients know where their money, their support came from?
This is the $1 million question. I love this question. And I get it all the time, and I truly love it. The short answer is no, and I'll tell you why. There's nothing that stops the person who's on the phone at the clinic from saying, oh, the Jewish Red Tent Fund is gonna give you money for your procedure. Yeah, Jews are great, they care about everybody. They can absolutely say that, and if you go to our website, we are unapologetically, indisputably Jewish. It is like right there, you cannot miss it. But we do not require or stipulate that our clinics share with the patient that this money is coming from the Jewish community, and here's why. One, a person's day and, getting their procedure may be the best day of their life, it may be the worst day of their life, or it may be anything in between. And I gotta tell you, the patient is not hearing anything you are saying other than we have funding. After that, they have stopped listening. They are just like, oh, thank God, someone can help me pay for this. So they're not hearing it anyway. Second, I really think that we as the Red Tent are here to solve an abortion problem and not a Jewish PR problem. I love that our community shows up and does this for the world. This is who we are. This is how we walk through the world. These are our values. But I'm not trying to solve the problem of Jewish PR. There's a lot of people who are much better at that working on that. JCPA and JCRC and all those folks. But the third reason is, of course, my Maimonides hierarchy of tzedakah, which is the greatest type of tzedakah you could do would be if I could, get someone a job that pays them and they could pay for their own procedure, right? But second to that, it is that the giver and the receiver are anonymous to each other.
Right.
And I don't want anyone to ever feel like, as much as I would love for them to know, oh, that's so great, the Jewish community cares about me. The flip side of that is, I don't want them to feel beholden. And I think there's a world in which our support could easily be weaponized. And I'm mindful of that, of look at all these Jews going out and killing Black and brown babies. And like, look how much they want to take credit for killing Black and brown babies. Now, obviously, I don't believe that, any of the words that just came out of my mouth, but I would be naive and an idiot to think that that's not gonna get thrown away.
Makes sense.
Do you have a question?
Well, just to maybe like toot the horn a little, if I got this right, because I'm trying to remember from our other conversation. This model of you providing monthly funding and doing it this way was an accident because you couldn't hire somebody in time and then you started getting donations, and so it was happenstance that this is how it happened, and nobody else provides like predictable income every month to these places, and it's because you have these donors, and that was an accident, but it speaks to the way you've done this, and it's multiplied. And so how do you, I mean, I know you were very lucky to have this and now you're funding all these, but how do you market for fundraising? Because it's not what you do. Like, you didn't start by saying like, hey, can you donate? But
Oh, no, we did. We always thought we were gonna pay for procedures.
no, but I mean, here, like, you don't come here and say, I'm here to take, how do you continue to fundraise? And then, your model is so kind of, that's not what you're yelling out at people, but it's happening. So how is it word of mouth to these big donors who have friends who can contribute, and you take small donations, you take whatever?
Absolutely. It's very much word of mouth. About half the people who find out about Red Tent find out about us through social media, or maybe we got some great press when we launched. We were very lucky that helped us. from like Times of Israel or Jewish, Jewish Insider, Jewish Philanthropy, things like that. And also, you know, the word of mouth is huge. And we definitely were very lucky that, a lot of those Jewish foundations who had been funding other Jewish abortion funds, whether it was DC Abortion Fund or others around the country, because the same thing that happened at my abortion fund was happening in lots of other places. And those Jewish abortion funds decided, yeah, we're not funding you anymore. And it was very much word of mouth of like, oh, hey, have you heard about the red tent? And so we got approached by a lot of program officers who said, we used to give to X, now we want to give X to you. So that was very helpful. But we do this, we talk all the time. We talk all around the country and, we rely on you all going home and telling 5 people about us, because my favorite thing is when at the end of a presentation at a synagogue, I always get someone who walks up to me in the most Jewish way possible, and they're like, how come I didn't know about you? You existed, and I'm like, because we're 2 years old and there's like 3.5 of us all together, and we've been talking for 2 years, but we haven't even scratched the surface. But it's so Jewish, I love it. You're in trouble, why didn't I know about you?
You don't call.
Exactly, you don't call, you don't write, like, what are you doing? I'm like, "That's Charlie." So we try to spread the word ourselves and through you all as much as possible. But yeah, we get everything from large donations from Jewish family foundations to people who give us, I'm being very serious. I think one of our donors gives us $3 a month. And they wrote the loveliest note and they said, I wish this could be more. And when I'm in a position to give more, it will be, but that's how important this is to me. And like, that's the kind of donation that just like, right here. Cause I know how much that means to that person that they are making that effort to go that mile.
So I have something that sort of tags on that. Because you're doing the funding the way you are, even if it happened by accident, are you like really? Because you said at the beginning and then, but like advertising the fact that it takes so much pressure off of these people who had to find their own funding. One, and the other is, it does mean that when you're fundraising, you're looking for commitment to be able to give, X amount to each clinic regularly.
Yeah.
And is there a different way of fundraising for that?
I think it's a little bit like doing your budget for your house, right? Like, you gotta pay the cable bill every month. They'll be the same amount until they like jack it up on you next year. You're gonna have to pay your mortgage payments. So you've got those like constants that we're planning for, and those are our monthlies. And then you also have, Hanukkah, when you're gonna like, your spending is gonna go up. So we do a lot of very intentional budget planning before the year starts to say, when are we gonna see those hills and valleys? One thing that you can't put your stock in this funding is, oh, I'm sure there'll be like a windfall. We never know when there's gonna be a Dobbs leak, a Dobbs decision, a horrible case that's gonna make everybody come out of the woodwork and give a whole bunch of money to abortion funds. And then next month, the next horrible thing is gonna happen and they're all gonna go back. So we can't plan for that. We can't depend on that. We can hope for it, but we have to be really intentional and thoughtful about our planning. And that's why we are really careful with our budgeting. To your first point about, are we making a big deal about the way that we do things differently? We are not the only clinic who does abortion fund who does block grant funding. I want to be clear. We're not the only one. Most abortion funds will do block grants when they close for a week over the summer, when they close for the week between Christmas and New Year's. So they know how to do it. They just choose not to. I think because the commitment, but also, what's the word I'm looking for? Like not the opposite of momentum, when you're just, it's like what you've always done, so you do it. You just keep letting.
What happened?
Yeah, that was the habit of doing it, like, or the inability, the lack of momentum. It's like, well, this is how we've done it. We have volunteers who answer the caller lines, and they like to feel like they're helping, and that makes them feel good, and so we're just gonna keep doing that way. And truly, when I launched Red 10, I thought I'm gonna do a call to Korman because that's what you do. And then within a month or two, I was like, this is silly. Why would we go back to doing this? It's so much more work for our programs person. It's so much more work for the patient. It's more work for the clinic staff because they have to coach a patient how to do all of this. And so our clinic staff is happy, our patients are happy, and we're gonna stick with it. But the public health nerd in me does want to do an assessment, and that is my goal sometime in the next 2 years, is to do some type of scientific research-based assessment on what is the impact of using our model versus a collar warm line model versus any other model that some other fund out there may be using. You know, how is that for patients? How is that for clinic staff? How much does that help spread the money? I would posit that the money goes further the way we're doing it, but I need to be able to back that up with data. I want to be respectful of everyone. Oh gosh, I'm so sorry.
No, we started a little late.
I'm so sorry. I do not want to take up your entire Sunday. I'm happy to answer that question, but I'm also happy
I don't
to.
think anybody felt forced.
Anybody on?
Violet, yeah. Marjorie or Ellen, do you have questions? Yeah, they know they're muted.
I do not, but I found the discussion very, very interesting. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Lily, thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Well, I'm no longer in Maryland, so it's Zoom or nothing.
Marjorie, from our synagogue that lives in Massachusetts.
Well, you know what? We're always looking for synagogue partners, and I don't have a ton in Massachusetts. So Marjorie, by all means, please send me a note and we will chat.
Okie doke, can do.
That's great.
Ally, is there any reason you didn't mention the magazine that was on? Name of the magazine, because I was gonna.
Your article, where was it published?
Oh,
It was tablet.
public, yeah, sorry.
Okay, you just not saying it,
You know-
that's no reason, but you should look at the article on
I
tablet.
think- I don't say the name of the outlet more and more so because I find the farther we get from October 7th, the more even within the Jewish world, people are getting segmented, and it's like, well, I read tablet, well, they're too conservative for me, so I read the forward, so it's like easier to just say I was published in an online Jewish
If
publication.
you want to read it, that's where it is.
Yeah, or if you want to read like, the list of how it went down, by all means. But I will just leave you all with my final call to action to you all, which is threefold. The first is, as someone so generously put it, I would be so grateful if you would contribute. I know it seems like we are doing great, and we are, and I'm so grateful we're doing great. However, what we have currently been able to fund is just a drop in the bucket for the need that actually exists. And the Jewish community is so dedicated to this issue. We are so committed to our values, to reproductive health and access. So I would be thrilled if you would consider it, to the point that we were talking about earlier. I would much rather you make an $18 monthly donation that I can count on every month and know that it's coming in than a one-time $100 donation, because I don't know if I'm ever going to see that again. But I'm grateful for it. I just don't know if I'll ever see it again. So we love a monthly donation. The second thing is I would ask that you do ask 5 people. Jewish, non-Jewish, daughter, sister, aunt, cousin, best friend, shul president at another shul. Please tell them that we exist. We are doing our best to get out there, but there's a lot of us. I know we're very small, but there's also a lot of us. And so we're trying to get our name out there as much as we can. And lastly, I ask that you, to the extent that you are comfortable, show up proudly, unapologetically Jewish and pro-abortion in the spaces you inhabit. I know it is not easy, and I know it is asking a lot, and you're putting a lot of opening the door to a lot with that statement. But I find that the more I am unapologetically who I am and care about the things I care about, the easier this gets. So if you are so moved, there are some pins and stickers over there on the table. If you haven't signed in the sign-in sheet yet, please do. And I really, really appreciate you all coming.
Thank you.
And of course, as always, we have some refreshments in the gallery. Please have something.
How about for me?
What's that?
Do you have a question, Marjorie?
Yep.
Okay, all right. Take care, Marjorie. Good to see you.
It's good to see you too. It's good to see all of you, actually.
All right, I'm ending this.
I will leave. Bye-bye.